Woohoo! We are live. So I am so excited today to have this conversation with you, Taylor. It's a conversation that's near and dear to my heart is, reconnecting with my intuition. I've spent many decades of my life really trying to find cut and dry, black or white science answers, and really spending a lot of time up here in my head. Mm-hmm. And before we kind of dive into this whole like intuitive eating, mindfulness around eating, I would love to hear a little bit from you as to your story, how you kind of came into the health world. I'll do the same because I know we've got two different audiences going here, but I'd love for you to introduce yourself and then I'll do the same and then we can dive right in. How's that sound?
That sounds great. I'm so excited to be here with you, Tareya. So my name is Taylor Riley, and I am a wellness empowerment leader with Green Roots Living. And we really look to serve women who have been putting themselves on the back burner for so long, right? And have found the repercussions of that manifesting as, chronic weight gain, different health issues. So we work together with our clients to really help them find balance again and equilibrium and create lifestyle habits that are going to be supportive for their long-term health. And it's near and dear to me, right? We all have our story because I, was once my client where I was working 80, 90-hour weeks for months and months and years on end. And, that started to manifest for me personally as things like shingles, walking pneumonia, high blood pressure, weight gain, insomnia, depression, anxiety, and, only when I finally hit kind of a really scary spot in my health did I realize, hey, this is not, I can't keep doing this. I'm literally going to put myself in an early grave, no matter how passionate I was about the work I was doing at the time. Right? What's purpose if you're not in a place of balance, and in a place that you can receive it and go out and enjoy your life with it. So that really led me to my studies in holistic health, and my biggest topic that I love to nerd out in is nutrition. Personally, but just, all of the different facets, all of the different puzzle pieces that we really need to be aware of that really enable us to thrive in our bodies instead of feel like prisoners in our bodies. So that's just a little snippet of why I'm here, because I believe, women especially, Tareya, and I know you know this firsthand and your clients know this firsthand too. I feel like we're so prone to do more and achieve more, and that's great. But if you continually put yourself at the bottom of that to-do list, things get real scary real quick, because your health will not wait for your schedule to be clear when it starts throwing up those big red flags. So I'm really excited to be here talking with you today and connecting with you and your people.
Same. And so for those that don't know who I am, my name is Tareya Rodriguez. I hold a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner certificate. That's what the FDNP is for. That's why it's shortened, because it's a mouthful. But, my story is very similar to yours. I was type A. I used to have a friend who called me type A plus. So type A, major achiever, climbed corporate ladders, switched careers, advanced in the new career, like kept doing a lot of these things. Endurance cyclist, you name it. I was just like layering it on top of each other. And I've always been kind of rooted in science. I love science. It's something that really speaks to me. And I also found that as part of my health journey, it became complicated. It wasn't, it was Hashimoto's. Millions of women have Hashimoto's. Mine was particularly difficult to treat, and I couldn't figure out why. And I kept going to the science and kept trying to figure it out. And, maybe if I just do AIP harder, and AIP is an autoimmune elimination diet, maybe if I do that harder, I'll be able to find some answers. And what turned out is I became sicker. And it really wasn't until I started paying attention to some of the emotional work that is involved in holistic healing, but really starting to pay attention to what is that thing called intuition.
Yes.
And that was the day when I woke up. I went to, I think it was by lunchtime or whatever. I was terrified to eat a tomato. That's really what had happened. There was like a tomato on the salad that I had ordered for lunch or something, and I was terrified of it. And the first thought that I had is, why? Why am I terrified of this food? And I realized it's because somebody's been telling me that nightshades are going to harm my body, and I believed it. And I looked at the science, right? There's science that supports that. However, it doesn't necessarily take in the whole picture. And then I realized, wow, I have been allowing other people to tell me what to do. I haven't really been listening to my body. What's going on here? And that was the tipping point. The salad with the tomato that frightened the heck out of me was the tipping point into, oh, there's more to explore here. And I need to get curious about what is this thing called intuition. And, back in the day, I just thought, oh, it's that gut feeling that you get. Or it's the first thought that comes to my mind, the first answer that comes to my mind. But that wasn't super reliable. I couldn't always trust that. And so I'd love to hear, from you, Taylor, what kind of brought you into intuitive eating? And I guess my question is not only what brought you towards intuitive eating, but how did you learn? Where did you start? And then I can share kind of the techniques that I learned too, but really kind of what got you here?
It's such a great question. And I love that story with your scary tomato. I get that with my clients all the time, right? We all have the same things, whether it's like fear of carbs. I have clients, who struggle with type 2 diabetes who are like, we can't eat fruit, no bananas. And it's just like you said, there's always going to be evidence to support whatever you're looking for. And that's when things start to get really muddied and convoluted. But like you said, you could adhere to a protocol, in your case, like AIP, and you were feeling worse. And your first instinct then was, I'm just not doing it right? I should be doing it better, or I should be doing it harder. And I see so much of that too. And that is really the root of, I feel, so much suffering for so many people, because it's like you feel like I'm doing the things, but it's not working. And here's the thing. Restrictive dieting is not the answer for most people, because like you said, it ignores intuition. It's just kind of like this general broad stroke that doesn't take into account what you need personally. And it doesn't take into account that you're a person in the world living life. And sometimes there's going to be a tomato on that salad, and you don't need to be afraid of it. Because, and I'm sure you have this too with your clients who come to you doing AIP or various protocols. Sometimes I've worked with women who it's just like, oh, like I got a PDF off of Instagram, or my neighbor was doing this. And it's like, yeah, but it worked for somebody else. We're talking about what you need. What are your body's cues? And for me specifically, when I go back to, my own personal story, I was ignoring my own body's cues, right? And that's how I got into that position. And so many people do that. You ignore those signs that you're hungry and I'll eat later, right? How many times have you been working so hard and you just forget to eat, or thirst, or
forget to go to the bathroom?
Right? Or you're feeling sluggish or tired, and instead of honoring and respecting what your body is asking for, we reach for another cup of coffee. Right? So I think because so many of us have fallen out of tune with listening to the subtle cues of our bodies, then we see the destruction that happens with that. Right? In your case, like AIP, and in my case, I was just like, I wasn't listening at all. I was just like fueled by coffee and like power bars, and really I needed to slow down. So intuition around and mindful eating is certainly part of it, but I think it starts with just listening to what your body is trying to say to you. And that can be really hard for a lot of people to get quiet enough in their own minds to hear that. What do you think?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I struggled with personally was those things were an annoyance. I remember when I was younger telling somebody that I just wish that we could come up with real life Soylent Green because eating it is getting in the way. I know it's gross, right? Even if you look at the real life Soylent Green that has come out, it's disgusting.
Thanks, nothing.
Yeah, it's really, really gross. And I actually saw somebody drinking it one time, and I was just like, oh, I can't believe that people really do that. But that was the thing, right? Those signals that my body was giving me, the feeling of fatigue or the feeling of hunger or the, even pain, to an extent, especially with endurance cycling, right? I mean, a lot of that is like, oh, I'm just going through a painful moment. If I keep going, I'll push through it and I'll get there. I'll get the 100 miles in. I'll get the whatever that is, right? Those things became an annoyance. And so I numbed myself to listening to those. And of course, things progressively got worse. And, so part of my wake-up call was when my body was just kind of like, that's it. Time out. You're basically not gonna get out of bed now.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
It's screaming at you, right? It gives the little whispers and then it starts yelling and then it just shuts the whole thing down.
Totally. Yeah. And, and I thought something was seriously wrong with me. The only thing we found initially was the Hashimoto's. Yet I was sleeping 14 hours a night and still woke up feeling like I got hit by a Mack truck. And I was like, what is this? I don't really understand. And, I think it took me a while to realize that part of that disconnection from my own intuition was me just not listening to my body and respecting the fact that it's a biological being. It's not a robot being that I was trying to be, and that it needed certain things to be able to thrive. And I had no idea what that was. So I turned towards people telling me what to do. Right. So that's when I got the elimination diet, or that's when I got, instructions from my practitioner at the time, do X, Y, Z, you'll be fine. Still, I'm following their advice. I'm not listening. Nobody coached me on how to listen to my body until way, way, way later. And that's the beauty of this intuition thing that you and I are talking about, that I think a lot of people hear the word, but don't really know what that means for them.
Yeah.
And part of my journey, I just remember going to, it was a TEDx Women event. And there were people in Silicon Valley giving these talks for the TEDx Women event. And I remember going to one and I was super excited because she was an executive at one of the major tech companies here in the Bay Area in California. And I really wanted to, hear from this leader, and wow, she's so accomplished. And this was already as I was like learning that I can't like push my body forever. And she starts telling the story about how she grew up in an Asian household that expected her to get certain levels of grades and be an athlete at the same time and do all of these things and perform and achieve and achieve and achieve. And then she continues to talk about how she is a super mom and super executive at the same time. And her message was, you just gotta sleep less and do more. And I was just like, wow. Okay, so this is how ingrained in our culture this ignoring of our body and ignoring those needs. And I know you see it all the time with your clients.
And like you said, that's exactly it. We set the ideal on producing and achieving more, and we become so disconnected with our own being, like you said, our bodies as a biological being, that we don't even know how to listen. And worse than that, we don't even trust ourselves to make decisions anymore. And we have to refer out to what the experts are telling us to do. And I tell my clients all the time when they come, listen, you intuitively know how to take care of yourself. It's just giving yourself permission to listen to that. Oftentimes people intuitively know, right? More fruits and vegetables, less burgers and fries and chips and cookies, right? We all know that. Like, that's indisputable.
Yeah.
We intuitively know that we need rest. A lot of us intellectually understand that too. A lot of us have seen the studies. A lot of us have, lived first world experience of what happens when you're sleep deprived. And yet there is this drive and this desire, like this, I agree with you, this like societal norm that says, yeah, but forget all of that. And just keep smiling and grab a cup of coffee and we'll take some pills for that blood pressure then. And you sleep when you're dead and, all of those things. And it's really comes down to, I think, honoring yourself and being able to ask yourself the question, is this what I want? Do I want to be so alien to my own being that I can't even hear my own inner voice and what I need in order to produce and do? Or at some point, do you stop and start listening to it and learn how to give yourself what you need? Otherwise, Turea, you and I know, and sadly so many others, that your body will just get ill. It will get sick and it will literally stop you in your tracks, whether you want to stop or not.
Absolutely. And that has been the case for so many of my clients. And before we move on, anybody who is listening to this right now, if you want to ask us a question or, comment, you can absolutely do so. For us to see who you are, you'll have to register with StreamYard. There is instructions on the post, but feel free to ask questions as you're listening to this, and Taylor and I will get in there and answer some of them live and or after the fact. But one of the things that I used to struggle with myself was, and I really think I learned this early on from my parents. So this has been a generational teaching, at least here in the United States. And I know that this is also happening worldwide. So it's kind of a human thing. But I learned early on that I needed to be responsible. And being responsible meant taking care of everybody else and everything else before myself, that there was something involved in the taking care of myself was a selfish act. Yeah. Those messages got really confused when I was very young. And so part of my doing that, part of my achieving, part of my taking care of everybody else was me trying to prove that I wasn't being selfish. And it wasn't until, much later on and in this journey, this health journey, that I started really realizing that that's not what the word means, right? Self-care is not the same as selfish. And I somehow had colluded those two ideas. And, that being responsible, especially when we become moms, right? We're now taking care of another loving being in this world. And we have this compulsion to take care of them. But that responsibility of taking care of other people, I think really furthers that divide. Has that been your experience too, in terms of, responsibility being the thing that gets in the way of any kind of self-care or intuitively taking care of yourself?
And for me personally, many, many years ago, before I, changed my lifestyle and changed my trajectory, but I see it with nearly every single woman that I speak with every day. In an effort, like you said, to provide and take care of others, they put themselves last, or they'll say, oh, I'll do something for myself as a reward, when I get it all done, and that time never comes, because it's never all done, right?
I know, right? Yeah, the list is never done. Right? I always think it's going to be, but it's not.
Never done, the list. There's always going to be 10 things to fill the spot. And here's what's interesting too, is a lot of the women that I've worked with, initially, they even come into my program, not even for themselves, because they're still worried about now their kids. What happens to me now? I'm so sick. What's going to happen to my child? What's going to happen to my partner? If I'm this sick that I can't take care of them. And, we work to shift those beliefs in our work together, but it's a really hard belief to flip. that you are worth it, and that the self-care is important. And that's where mindfulness really comes in when we're talking about mindfulness and intuition. Mindfulness is the ability to be the observer, and objectively see what it is you're doing and start to notice your own patterns and your own beliefs and your own processes, so you can say, hey, is that true? Is it absolutely true that the only way that I can show my love and care and concern for my family is to feel, that I've got to do 18 hours a day and that I leave myself the scraps at the end? Or do I need to take care of myself in order to be the best version of myself for them? Or do I need to raise my children prioritizing their care? So in order to do that, I need to lead by example. The same reaches out to our friends and our community and the world, I believe. So just having that mindfulness and being aware of the stories that we tell ourselves so much informs our ability to really honor that intuitive voice inside of us that's saying what it needs or what our body needs, or, just at any given point, whether it's hunger, thirst, rest, any of those things.
Yeah. And, it's a skill. Yes. It doesn't come easy at first. It's definitely a skill. And it's one that I teach my clients, especially around the idea of doing food reintroductions, right? Getting past that place of the tomato is scary, the almond is scary. I don't want to go too far down that path, but there's definitely.
I agree with you. That's the first step, right? Rejecting that diet that you can only have this very restricted, narrow view of what's possible for you.
And I think for some women, it's harder when they actually see the benefit. So they did a restrictive diet, they started to feel better. And now it's like, I don't want to reintroduce those things because I'm afraid that I'm going to go back to that place that I was in that was so terrible. And yet at the same time, I've had people start there and then something shifts and then they start to spiral and they get worse and worse and worse. And so now they're starting to become afraid of more foods because they are reacting, really physically, really reacting to these foods, and they don't understand why. So they eliminate them, right? So it becomes this other spiral going on, and there's a whole other biological thing that we could talk about on that, but I don't want to get too far off topic. But I think part of it is that the shifting that you were talking about, the really asking, is it true, is one of the first steps. The awareness, like you were saying, is one of the very first steps. But then also realizing that just like any skill, learning how to ride a bike, learning how to balance our checkbook, learning how to, speak a new language, any skill that we have, learning how to, wire a light socket, doesn't really matter. It's possible to learn. And that is the thing that I am always feeling very reassured about, especially when moving into this thing of intuition, which didn't feel very sciencey at the time, right? It didn't feel like black or white or concrete and, I don't know. That's so subtle. Can I try?
Protocol feels so much easier.
Totally. Yeah, totally. So, just knowing that you've got the ability to learn a new skill and then practice with that and get super curious. Do you have a template or do you have a procedure, if you will, in terms of how you teach intuition? Because it is kind of a ethereal type thing. It's not, I can't reach out and I want to touch it. I can't. Do you have any kind of technique that you use?
We do, several different practices, right, to get in touch with this, because like you said, it is very ethereal and it's different for different people, and different people have different blocks. So I think the first thing that's really important is to assess what your blocks are and see what those patterns are and see what your self-sabotaging patterns are, just see what the blocks and the beliefs are. And like I said, just switch on that awareness and shine a light onto what's really going on. And then from there, you can move forward. But some of the things that I have found in the initial stages in introducing this way of living is simply just doing like body scans and noticing where we hold emotion, noticing where we might be holding tension. When we get excited, what does that feel like in our body? When we go to reach for food, you know, we have a bunch of different steps that we work with our clients, especially when it comes to like stress eating and emotional eating, which, you know, there's obviously a big component of being more intuitive and being more mindful there, about just taking, you know, a pause and what am I really feeling, and allowing yourself the space to let your body answer, because the more you give your body, the more you give a pause and allow your body the space to answer, you're just going to feel it. It's going to start coming to you. But like with anything, it's a practice. So, you know, I would say different things for different people, but it's not like, you know, you just switch a flip and then all of the sudden, you know, you're like a pro. As like you said, with anything, but there's all different types of exercises that you can do. But I really think just the most simple way to start would be doing, you know, a very gentle body scan and just start to feel where you hold emotions and start to recognize what that is. Because sometimes people are like, oh, you know, I'm anxious. Are you anxious? Are you hungry? You know what I mean?
Yeah, fascinating, right?
Big one too for the women that we work with that struggle with stress eating too. It's like, you know, did you eat today? You know what I mean? And are you spiraling out into the hanger? Or on the flip side of that, is your body not hungry and you're anxious and you really need some type of outlet for stress or some type of stress management technique in that moment to give your body what it needs? Is it looking for comfort, for example? Is it looking for freedom? Is it looking for release? And in the case of talking about, you know, emotional eating, sometimes, you know, grabbing that food, that's, again, when we talk about discovering what the patterns are. So I'm interested to hear what approaches you use and find effective, because I've seen that for different people, different things, you know, they reach out and try a few things and different things stick and really resonate.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, one of the techniques that I teach others to do is one that resonated really closely with me, right? Mm-hmm. So it was one of those that felt very effective. And, you know, at first, part of it is the process of becoming aware of emotions. I had become an expert in avoiding emotion for many decades.
That's right.
And so, you know, initially this felt kind of scary, like I was opening up Pandora's box, because I was getting into an area that I was unskilled at. So I felt like a beginner and weird and newbie and, you know, all of that stuff. And I wasn't quite sure about, emotions, what's that going to do? So there was that part of it. But one technique that was taught to me was really, really brilliant, which is to imagine a time where you are excited and joyful. Like, remember a time, not imagine, but remember a time, even if it's when you were a kid, where you were just so excited and joyful, and see if you can't close your eyes and just really remember like the details of it. What were you wearing? Where were you? What was it that you were doing? Or, you know, were you opening a present at Christmas? Like what was that for you? And then take notice of your body position when you were in that state. So that emotional state tends to create a body position where your head is up, you might be smiling, your shoulders are back, you know, you could be having fun, you know, leaping around, whatever it happens to be. But you'll notice that there's really subtle clues in the body of expansion in that moment. And conversely, having this memory of, you know, something where you knew it wasn't right, or you were not feeling well, or you know, things were going wrong. And then same thing, really pay attention to what was the body position in that moment during that memory. And chances are your shoulders are going to be hunched, your thorax is going to be like all curved, your head's going to be down, your your face might just drop just real subtly, right? Or your chin might drop really subtly. And it's very subtle movement in the body. And once you get accustomed to those very subtle movements in the body, then it's a matter of becoming quiet, tuning in with your heart, or, your heart center, or your body, and just really thinking about, am I really hungry right now for that cupcake? Is that going to serve me right now? And then just pay attention to what your body says, because sometimes logic may tell you, oh my God, that's full of sugar. No, the body might be saying yes. And it will go against these lists that people have come up and advice that you've heard. And it's totally fine for it to be illogical, because that was the thing with intuition, is it's not up here. It's not in the brain. It's not the overanalyzing the pros and cons,
right?
Which I'm so good at. It's not any of that. It's very much getting in tune with the body and really noticing those subtle differences. And it does take practice, and it takes sometimes you're not going to get it right, and that's okay too. That's part of being a new at anything, right? Remember when you first learned how to ride a bike with the training wheels, I might add, it's like there were times where you still crashed.
Yeah.
And so, it's fine. That's how we learn, is through that experimentation. And so that was something that just really resonated with me, because it's something I can do anytime, anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't have to be in a meeting and have somebody notice, oh my gosh, there she's doing her weird intuition thing again. How freaky is that? I can literally just close my eyes for a millisecond and just take notice, like, where's my chin? What's my facial expression in this moment? And really notice it from there. And so from that, you can then extend that intuition into other areas of your life, not only just about what you're going to eat or what feels right in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I love that, because our physiology doesn't lie.
It doesn't.
No.
And I think that is one of the things that, when I tried to go to the science on all of this, and there's plenty of science in this area around intuition and those kinds of things. I think I really thought that there's no way that we can't just have it from a knowing, like a logical, in the brain thought process. And once again, I was trapped by my thoughts and not really paying attention to the body. And then somebody asked me, well, our ancestors, who didn't even have the power of true language way back when, like tens of thousands of years ago, how did they know what to eat?
Yeah.
Right? And it wasn't just knowledge, because while you can animals can show each other how to do things, and they learn in that way. There was also that sensation of the body that they had to be tuned into, because it wasn't this, like, there was nobody with a AIP yes or no list.
Yeah.
Put it that way. That didn't even exist back then. So if that intuition was strong then for cultures to thrive, to bring us to now, then why can't we do it now?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really what it is. And I love when you say it's illogical, right? Because
absolutely.
we want it to be easy. We want to have the answer. And we want it to be told to us, right? We want to just get right to it. But the fact is that you need to cultivate a relationship with yourself. And that is a continuous process of learning and discovering and uncovering and learning to trust and know. And I think, like you said, when we talk about restrictive diets in particular, and you started to mention earlier, even if people feel better initially, are they just trading in one set of struggles for another? Because now they might physically feel better, but emotionally, what is the toll it takes every time they go out to eat, every time they have family over, every time they open the fridge? You become food obsessed, what I can eat, what I can't eat. And behavioral science shows us that when we restrict something, we want it even more. right? So now you're just setting yourself up for a new prison. Sure, your body might be feeling better, but now you're a slave to the list of rules. And
Absolutely.
you're trading in one kind of crummy place to be for another kind of crummy place to be, but you don't have a physical symptom, but you have to constantly be worried. And when we talk about, you know, just listening to our body's wisdom and being mindful of what it asks for, a lot of people say to me, oh no, but like, then I'm going to eat all the cupcakes, you know, but you won't, right?
Yeah.
Because like anything else, one cupcake is good. 10 cupcakes will make you sick. Your body's going to stop you. One slice of pizza sounds good if you eat it mindfully, but a whole pizza pie will make you sick. So there's no intrinsically good or intrinsically bad food. It's about how you choose to consume it, if you're doing so mindfully or if you're just shoving something in your face, or if you're adhering to some kind of protocol without any time of working with, you know, a professional that's really paying attention to what your body needs. And like we talk about, from a holistic place, it's not just about looking at what the labs say, right?
Right.
About
Absolutely.
looking so much more than that. And I think you're right. Once people can start to embrace the idea that there is a gray area that is a beautiful place to live in, it doesn't need to be all one or all the other, then people can start to let go of a lot of the rules and restrictions they put around themselves, you know, not only with food, but what we were speaking about earlier in terms of what the expectations they set for themselves in their lives. I either have to work like a maniac and achieve, or I'm a selfish, lazy bum because I took a nap today. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's finding that beautiful balance in the middle and trying to live in that space the majority amount of the time, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful, because one of the things that I did want to talk about, which you segued beautifully into, is that this notion of mindfulness and restoring your intuition has not been a Pandora's box in my experience. It has been quite the opposite. It has been a path towards freedom. It has been a path towards opportunity. And it has been a path towards growth that I would never have gotten to had I stayed in my head and stayed in the rules and stayed in the place where other people were telling me the things to follow, right? So, you know, in that sense, it really is one of the things that for all my clients, and I'm sure for all your clients, really opens up a whole world of possibility.
Oh, yeah.
That is really hard to describe at the get-go. You know, it's like we know what's possible for them, but in that moment, they're just kind of like, "You want me to do what? Listen to my body? What podcast is that?" Right? So it's like, you know, they're not quite ready for it, but once they start practicing it, wow, the freedom opens up. They can enjoy time with their friends again and go out to eat and not be so freaked out that they're going to get poisoned from the restaurant. You know, all of those things allows them to really restore joy and happiness in their life again. And that's something that I think is just really, really important in terms of us living vibrant, beautiful, wonderful lives in the short time while we have on the planet, you know?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because when you listen to your body and you cultivate that relationship, like you said, just, I know we're talking about food as an example here, but you know, how oftentimes you walk down the street and you have a sense of, you know, I should turn right, or, you know, maybe avoid a certain person, or have you gotten a feeling like, oh, I'm thinking about so-and-so, and then called them and they were like, oh, I'm just thinking about you. You know, your body is this living, breathing thing in the world. And when we only pay attention to what the mind tells us, you know, we're really neglecting an important part of ourselves that we could use, that relationship to really understand what it is that we want. And I love your exercise for doing that with your physiology. And I love one that does something similar, just, you know, closing your eyes and doing deep breathing and asking yourself yes and no questions and seeing how that comes up. Because you'll find that you can do this, like you said, in a millisecond with anything. And once you start to trust yourself, You no longer have to adhere to the protocols or the diet books or the methods because, or you know, what the consensus says. You'll have that gut feeling and you'll know that you can rely on it. And it is so empowering to be able to make decisions from a place that are truly nourishing you and serving you without having to depend upon, you know, rules and restrictions from, you know, the powers that be, or, you know, the next expert or whatever, because you're going to give yourself that space to always get what you need. And like you said, it's a beautiful thing because all of those rules go out the window. And you can start being in the world, being, you know, in the world. We're not of the world, right? But we're in the world and embracing that. And I just think it's such a beautiful message, Saraya.
Yeah, and you know, one of my coaches, and you've probably heard this before, Taylor, says that we are born of an unconscious knowing, and that's not the first time that I've heard that. And you know, when you think about it, when we are created, there is this unconscious knowing, but where does the soul come from? And, you know, where does that universal knowledge come from? And that trust that you're building, in my belief, that trust that you're building not only within yourself, but also is attached to universal trust and universal knowledge. And so, I mean, this goes way bigger than just intuition to figure out what foods to eat. But that's the piece that feels so reassuring, is that the universe has got your back.
Of course.
You know, and so, you know, without going too far down a rabbit hole, and I know we're getting a little bit short on time, but just know that intuition is a beautiful thing. It's an opening towards a lot of joy and happiness, and it's an easy skill to learn. It just requires some practice.
That's it. It's a constant practice. But like anything, worth anything, it's worth that consistent practice, because if you are tired of feeling like you keep throwing things against the wall and they're not sticking, it's time to really step back and listen and see what you need to change, because something needs to change. And chances are, if you get quiet enough and self-reflective enough, you'll be able to find that answer. I love that, Saraya.
Yeah, it's awesome. Any closing thoughts, Taylor?
No, you know, I just think, like you said, it's so important. And I love, you know, and I would love for us to talk, you know, at some point, or we can provide, I'd love to share some resources, because I feel like for a lot of my clients, it's like you need to intellectually get on board before you can commit to that piece. And, you know, there is so much science that shows that we have this innate ability to find the answers that we need and trust our bodies. And sometimes people need to see that in black and white, so it doesn't sound like this big, you know, like you said, ethereal concept. And I'd be happy to share some of my, you know, favorite resources, and I can send those to you. And I'd love to know what yours are too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to have you come on another one of these conversations, probably a different topic at some point, but thank you so much for
coming together
and jamming about this wonderful topic with me today. And
it's such a pleasure to talk to you always. Okay, great. Well, I'll see you. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
See ya.
Bye.